Every student is different, and each one has a unique set of strengths and weaknesses. While this contributes to the formation of diverse classroom environments, it is important for professionals who work in schools to recognize that each student will have specific learning needs. So although many students are able to learn effectively from traditional classroom instruction, there are also many students who may struggle to do so. One reason why a student may experience difficulty learning in class may be because their mental capacity for taking in new information and learning from it is being overloaded. In particular, there may be limitations to something called working memory. Working memory is a system in the brain that describes our capacity to retain, process, and manipulate information. Working memory has its limits, and as information becomes more complex, it becomes that much harder for us to hold that information in our brains and to process it. Some students may experience more difficulty with learning because of underlying challenges with, or constraints on, working memory. Working memory directly impacts how we take in and understand new information, but also facilitates other related processes that support learning. Attention, for instance, is strongly associated with working memory. One study found that 7-year-old children were able to focus and distribute attention as well as adults, except when working memory was overloaded by tasks of increasing complexity. Greater demands on working memory may therefore limit a child's ability to maintain their attention, making it difficult for them to learn information that is presented in a complex way. I will be discussing some of the strategies that teachers or other professionals working with students in a school setting can use in order to support students who may experience challenges with learning due to working memory constraints. Before we can discuss how to support these students, we first need to understand how to identify children with these kinds of difficulties. In a classroom setting, these children often may appear to have difficulty understanding instructions, or they may appear to ignore them. They similarly might not answer questions sufficiently, or they may even make unrelated comments. These types of responses may not be because the child is intentionally being inattentive, but rather because they are unable to effectively process all of the information they are hearing. They may have trouble following directions, especially when the directions consist of multiple steps. For instance, a direction like go back to your seat, get out your math book, and turn to page 25 may involve too much information for the child to keep in their short-term memory. These students may also have academic difficulties. In particular, students with deficits in short-term memory or processing speed, which are components of working memory, may exhibit weaknesses in academic skills such as basic reading skills, reading comprehension, math reasoning, math calculation, or written expression. Because of the limitations that working memory challenges impose on attention, these children may appear to be inattentive, unmotivated, bored, or they may have trouble focusing. They may also be easily frustrated or overwhelmed, due to constantly being overloaded with information that is too complex for them to process effectively. Once students with these types of challenges have been identified, there are a number of strategies that can be incorporated in the classroom to support learning and comprehension. The first strategy is repetition. Incorporating repetition as much as possible into class activities will help to support learning in students with working memory deficits. Demands on working memory are significantly reduced as skills become more automatic. The best way to develop this automaticity is through repetition. In particular, repeatedly practicing a skill or concept to the extent that it becomes overlearned. This is similar to how we are able to recite the days of the week or the letters in the alphabet without needing to think too much about it. This is knowledge that is virtually automatic to us as we have learned through repeated practice and exposure. Another strategy is to use clear and concise language and short phrases. Present instructions in simple language and break them up into shorter steps, providing only one simple instruction at a time. Repeat instructions when necessary, and especially when they involve something novel that is out of the typical classroom routine. You may also want to ensure that academic materials are presented using simple language that is familiar to the child. Textbooks and other written materials that involve a lot of new vocabulary and complicated language structures can impose significant processing loads on some students. It can make a world of difference to present the same information in simpler terms using vocabulary that the student is familiar with. This reduces their processing load so that they can focus their efforts on understanding the content rather than focusing their mental resources on decoding the language. Encourage students to ask for clarification when they are having trouble understanding. Also consider incorporating summarizing into your lessons. Follow-up lessons or sets of instructions with a clear summary. Students can also be encouraged to generate their own summaries. This helps to determine whether they are fully understanding the material or not. Breaking down tasks into smaller components can also be a useful strategy to support these students. Children with working memory deficits are likely to perform better in tasks that impose a smaller load on their cognitive resources. So, minimize the amount of information that the child needs to keep in their short-term memory. Similarly, incorporating multiple modalities into lessons and activities can also be effective. Supplementing verbal instructions with pictures, gestures, and written instructions, for instance, can help to support the student. When material that you are verbally delivering is supplemented with these other modalities, the student has less to retain in their memory because of these additional supports. Incorporating multiple modalities into activities can also be effective, as multimodality activities involve stimulating multiple sensory systems and can provide a more enriching learning experience. Just be careful that providing multiple modalities does not make the activity more complex, as the goal is to support the student's learning, not to challenge them further. One example of how to integrate visual supports effectively into academic material is in math. Using visuals and number lines can support a child's understanding and minimize the amount of information they have to keep in their memory. This frees up cognitive resources that can be used to process the information and carry out mathematical operations. While many of these suggested strategies may appear to be quite specific, some broad principles you can apply and keep in mind when preparing academic materials for students with working memory challenges includes thinking about how to simplify the activity, how to minimize the load that you are imposing on the child's working memory, how to maximize the level of support you are providing, and finally, how to facilitate success. For students with more significant working memory deficits, they may have become accustomed to performing poorly at school and may therefore be extremely discouraged or unmotivated. Providing as much support as is necessary to help students experience success is an important component in facilitating a positive and encouraging learning environment.